Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our second virtual Science Saturday. I am here live up on the new Science Saturday locations on Pink Whale Road. I would like to dedicate this morning to my coffee. We spent so long going to Lattes in Paradise every month that I am making sure to have my coffee right along with this while we're doing Science Saturday. So today I have with us Joe. Hey, Joe. And Jason from the Core Foundation, and we are going to learn about lionfish. So let's get started.
All right, well, this is a really exciting episode of Science Saturday. I like episodes now. We're actually going to have the chance to take a look at the invasive Indo-Pacific lionfish that's here in the Caribbean. And we're really lucky to have Jason here because he's really an expert on all of this. I'm just going to kind of be helping him out. To get more into learning about the Indo-Pacific lionfish, this is what's called an invasive species here in the Caribbean. This means this species did not arrive in the Caribbean naturally in any way. It was introduced by humans. And while sometimes this can have effects that are negligible or potentially not a large deal, a lot of times a species will become invasive when it starts to exhibit a negative impact on the environment. So if we take a look at these guys are fish that Jason and I caught yesterday, right? Mm-hmm. And so you can see that they're pretty small compared to like what you might think about like really negatively impacting, fish, right? And so a big part of that is because these fish are, despite how small they are, really, really voracious eaters. And so they love to eat all kinds of tiny little juvenile fish that are on the reef. And that can be a big problem for our native species. They start off really small and aren't used to having a predator like this. And so it means that even though our big, full-grown adults aren't really seeing an effect, it means that generations and generations go by where little fish are eaten a lot more higher frequency than what we're used to. And that can ultimately really cause a problem for our populations of our native fish that we love to eat.
Correct. Not just the juvenile native fish that are being eaten, but also things like shrimp, the cleaner shrimps that our local species depend on for getting rid of parasites, those cleaning stations. We haven't really seen the lionfish in the invasive area utilizing those cleaning stations. Instead, they're going there and eating the shrimps and our local species aren't cleaned as often as they should.
That's messed up.
Yes.
Yeah, seriously. And so another big problem with these guys is not only are they eating so much, but they're not being eaten the way native species are being eaten. So we know that we have a natural food web where we have larger fish eating smaller fish, et cetera, all the way down to the the smallest fish in the little fish chain. The problem is a lot of our native species aren't used to seeing a fish like this and actually don't want to go after it. So lionfish have developed from their native range in the Indo-Pacific a number of defense mechanisms to keep themselves from getting eaten, but because they don't have those predators here, they're actually just not being eaten a lot and they're being left alone. A lot of times you can see lionfish just out and about when there are things like sharks and big groupers about because those predators just aren't interested in them. And I mean, we do have a number of reasons why. I'm going to get down low here, but what we see here, as Jason was pointing out to me earlier here, is we have a number of venomous spines all along this fish, and not just along this top here, but along these sides, along the back. Here, Jason, you can point out where they are here.
So right here we have the dorsal spines. There are 13 total there. On the bottom we have these pelvic fins that will also have some spines. They're a little bit harder to see because they're small. But they're like these leading spines on the outside, so there's one on each side. And then we have the anal fin right here, which has 3 spines on the leading edge. So you can see 1, 2, 3 right there. So those are the venomous spines on the lionfish. It's got the caudal fin, or the caudal fin right here. It's got the dorsal fin, dorsal rays that don't have spines. And then it also has the pectoral fins right here. So these don't have spines, these are nice and soft. Okay.
Right.
So these are the ones you really have to be careful of, those 13 on the top and then the other 5 on the bottom.
And because of the way the lionfish is swimming, a lot of times it'll have these pectoral fins kind of splayed all the way out, especially when it's feeling defensive, and so it'll kind of form this ball of venomous spines in kind of all directions. And so, for a predator fish that maybe hasn't seen a fish like this before, seeing all these kind of potentially venomous spines, not to mention this kind of bright coloration that indicates, hey, I'm dangerous. It's probably not a fish of choice for a lot of our native predators.
And those spines, they're typically up on full display, as well as their pectoral fins. And so the fish appears a lot larger than their actual body size. So these guys don't appear to be very big, but when you see them underwater on display like they normally are, they appear to be a much larger fish.
They definitely looked a lot bigger when we caught them yesterday.
Yeah.
I'm sure they were this big.
But yeah, Jason, if you want to show kind of what we were doing a second ago,
Sure.
about how, so because these spines, they're not just spiky, they're actually venomous, which means they have a toxin that they're encoded in, that when you are pricked by these spines, that toxin goes into your body and can cause some pretty uncomfortable effects, right?
Right, so if you were to get envenomated by one of the spines, you would have, aside from that puncture wound, you get lots of swelling in that general area, and then just intense pain. There are some ways to help deal with that, and we'll go into that a little bit later, but we'll show you how that venom is introduced into your tissue. So right here you can see that this is the very first spine right here. It's coated in this tissue. Now that tissue keeps the venom locked into the grooves of the spine. Now if something were to hit the spine, and Joe's going to show you, pretend this is like your tissue.
My skin here just kind of goes,
So it goes over the spine, and what happens is...
let me get that thread off here.
You can see the tissues pushed back, and you can't really see those grooves because the the spines are clear and the grooves are very small. But as that tissue is pushed back, it allows the venom to enter into the bloodstream and the tissue of the location.
Now, that's not deadly to people, right?
No, it's just very painful.
Right. Still don't want it to happen to you.
Right, and because a lot of times these fish are being removed by divers, so you're already in an environment, you're underwater that that's already trying to you're underwater, so you
can't just get right to medical care. You can't run to a doctor.
You could be out on a beach, out on a boat.
Right.
So, one of the things that we do to we're really careful when we're dealing with lionfish, but if we were to get stung, we carry these hot packs. They're reusable, and underwater we can activate them. They get really, really hot, not too hot that it'll scald you, but hot enough that when you put it on that location that was stung, will help to denature the venom. So the sooner you can get a very hot, tolerable heat source on that area, is the sooner that venom is going to break down, and it'll also cut down on its ability to move through the rest of your body. Okay. Now we also use things like specialized gloves that are puncture resistant. Okay, so these will stop like a hypodermic needle. So we can use these so that as we're handling the fish, especially underwater, that we're less likely to get stuck in our hands. We have the zookeeper. Joe can show you here. Sure. And we can put the lionfish inside of the zookeeper, and that will keep us protected as we're swimming around.
Right. So this is all PVC, so the spines are going to come through any of this, and then the fish will come into this as a one-way valve, so that even if we're collecting a lot of fish at once, it allows them all to kind of stay contained in here while we're able to continue our dive safely.
Right.
So, there's a lot of work that kind of goes into not only, effectively and safely removing the fish on our side, but also making sure that we can understand what's going on with this fish, because the more we know about it, the more we can do to prevent it from causing a major impact in the Caribbean, right? So, Jason here has been kind of studying these fish for a long time, and so I think it'd be great if we could kind of just like walk through a little bit more about the fish itself and its anatomy, and a little bit more understanding of some of its other defense mechanisms. What do you think?
Okay. So first off, the lionfish, they're either born male or female, and for the most part, you can't tell the difference if you just saw them together in the water. The males do typically grow larger than the females, and they are capable of spawning year-round in warmer waters. They can reach maturity, the females, in less than 2 years, and they can grow up to over 7 inches in 1 year. One thing that we have seen in the invasive range is that the lionfish are growing larger than they do in their native home range. And this could possibly be due to the fact that they have easier access to the prey source in the invasive range. The prey, you don't see them as a predator, and so maybe they're eating more often.
And we do see a higher concentration too, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can go down to some areas and all you see are lionfish, and you don't see a lot of the larger predator fish like the snappers or the groupers. So what we're trying to do, not only are they eating those fish, especially in their juvenile form, but they are also the areas that they live in the invasive range. They're actually displacing fish that would be living there. So they like to hide out in similar places like lobsters, or where you might find groupers and things like that hiding. So when these guys are in those, they're displacing fish that would normally be there.
All right, guys, we do have a question from the audience. Sophia, hey, Sophia, would like to know, she said her son and friend would like to know, what should they do if they catch one with their rod and reel? What's the safest way to handle, how to dehook it, and safely kill it?
Okay, well, if you catch one on while just hand lining,
good job.
Yes. Yeah.
Eat it.
That does not happen very often. But what I would do in that situation, if you haven't been trained to properly handle lionfish, a lot of people are worried about these big spines on top, but they forget about the small ones on the bottom trying to handle the fish. So if
you see this one here poking out.
Yeah. So if you don't have the proper gloves, my suggestion would be to just cut the line, above the hook, and put the lionfish in a spot where you're not going to be able to hit it. Don't put it in a cooler with your regular fish and then forget about it later.
Yeah, so maybe we use like a bin when we're catching our lionfish, right, and things like that.
So keep it separate. Be careful, because the spines, they are fragile and they can break. Just bringing them onto the boat, and then you can have a spine or spines just kind of moving around the deck of the boat. So just be really careful with that stuff. And I would just, if you have it in that area, just keep it separated. You can try to brain the fish if you want, but that would have you handling the fish more. I would say to just put it in a container, or if you have like a catch bag or something like that, and then you can also just put it in the water until you get back to shore, just like hang it overboard. If you give us a call, we'll come pick it up, at the Core Foundation. We don't want anyone to get hurt, especially, unsuspecting, catching a fish like that. Okay.
Yeah, and, and we're going to get into this a little bit later, but with the proper training, you can actually clean these guys up and make a pretty fun meal for yourself. So.
That's right. They are delicious.
Yeah. So definitely, definitely don't throw them back. Even if you don't want to take the time to clean them, just make sure that they're completely dead, and don't just kind of throw them right where you caught them necessarily. So if you're unsure, feel free to contact the Core Foundation anytime. They can advise you on the best ways to kind of work with your situation.
Scan here. Phone number, website. We'll show that again.
We'll make sure that's all posted with the video, so that people can reach out to Core for training and things like that.
What kind of bait were you using?
Yeah, we're always curious to learn more about how people are catching lionfish. But Jason, another question I had was, what's the biggest lionfish you've seen?
The biggest one that I have seen personally was about 17.5 inches long.
17.5 inches?
Yeah.
So for those of us who aren't very good at estimating size, how big is that? That.
That's a little over 1.5 feet long. Now keep in mind when we're doing
It would
these.
be bigger than that.
Right. Keep in mind when we're doing these measurements, and I'm going to handle this guy carefully here. What we're doing is we're putting the fish on its side, and we're measuring from the mouth all the way to this very end tip here. And that's what's called the total length of the fish. This is what scientists use to measure, you know, kind of get an estimate of different sizes of fish, both within the same species and across a number of species. And this is one of several measurements we can do to kind of get an idea of how big this fish is. We can also weigh it, we can weigh the fillets, we can look at different length measurements as well as kind of this maximum height here. Yeah, so.
Yep, and also, you know, if for people who are getting really into it, once you get into the internals of the fish, you will see there's like interstitious fat, and you can remove all of that. You can weigh that separately to kind of see the fat content on the fish.
Right.
You can weigh if there's anything within the stomach. You can weigh that out just to kind of see, you know,
How well it's fed,
Correct.
what it's eating,
Yep.
those kinds of things.
and then there's also the gonads. You can weigh that. It helps with just kind of showing how mature the fish is.
And we have some gonads over here, right?
We do. This is actually some eggs from a female.
So
So we have some eggs right here.
Mhm.
And so sometimes you'll find several lionfish hanging out together. A lot of times you'll find that the largest lionfish in the group is the male. And so you can have a male and several females. So this was a very large male. I think it was around 14 or 15 inches that we had caught at one of our offshore sites, and it
again,
had
over 1 foot long.
Yeah.
That means.
And then it had, I think, 4 or 5 other lionfish surrounded by it. And 2 of those lionfish that we brought back, you know, we had eggs developing. They weren't fully developed just yet, but they were getting there pretty quickly. And the male, we don't have the testes to show you what those look like, but they were, I mean, they were pretty large. So it was a big mature male ready for spawning.
And they can spawn pretty often, right?
They can, and it's possible that you know, when you have a higher count of like the female lionfish around them, not just can they spawn with those different females, but they can spawn more often with them. You know, so it kind of increases the amount of eggs that are you know, just burst into the water column. So a single mature female can release up to 30,000 eggs at
Wow.
in one spawning event. That's not to say there's going to be 30,000 new lionfish, but they're released in these egg sacs that you're seeing here. There's going to be 2 egg sacs that she releases. The male lionfish will fertilize those eggs. They'll float up to the surface of the water, and they'll drift along on the sea surface for about a month before they start settling in a new area. So, you know, if we even removed all the lionfish around the Virgin Islands today, the whole time, you know, you've got other lionfish spawning, and their eggs can be floating in our direction, and they can be settling in our shores. And when they start settling, they should be around a centimeter long.
Right, yeah, just, I mean, again, for
Really-
a centimeter, that's like maybe, you know, like less than a half an inch.
Yeah, they're really, really tiny. And they kind of, you know, settle wherever they are. And I have seen some pretty small lionfish, but I've never seen one quite that small. It's really hard to see the small ones in general.
They're pretty good at hiding, too.
They're very good at hiding. At that point, you know, they are also vulnerable to our normal predators, like the big snappers and groupers, eels, and like trumpetfish, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, and because they're able to spread so many eggs, this is one reason that we see them having spread so much across the entire Caribbean. There's not really a clear story on how exactly they first arrived here. I think I've heard legends from as far as, you know, people releasing them from their aquariums in Florida to a hurricane, releasing them from a, you know, a professional aquarium. I mean, the stories are far and wide. But what we know is there was a first appearance in Florida in the mid-'80s.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, we've kind of been able to monitor the appearance of lionfish slowly, more or less, spreading all over the Caribbean. Yeah.
And they tolerate a wide range of temperatures. For instance, they've been found as far north as I know as Maine. They're found inland in waters where it's a little bit more brackish, and they're found in just a few inches of water down to 1,000 feet deep. So they can live just about everywhere. The cooler areas that they're in, they're probably not spawning as actively. But these guys are, they exist throughout the whole Atlantic and Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico. They're here to stay.
Yeah. Well, I think we've gotten a good look at these fish. Do you want to maybe we can take a look a little bit inside them some? So I think first, do you want to try and get the spines off, or some of the spines?
Yeah, let's do that so we can show people how to do it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
We're going to.
We won't do it for everything here, but I think it's really important that people see that once you've disposed of these spines, it can become a lot easier to work with.
Right. And the specialized gloves are pretty easy to find.
Home Depot or...
Well, for the ones that are very cut resistant, like the turtle skin gloves, they work really well. They have different cut levels depending on what you feel comfortable with.
Please note, turtle skin is a brand name. They are not made from turtle skin.
Thank you.
Always important to know.
Yeah. And some of the local dive shops, they have gloves for sale as well.
Sure.
Yeah. So
you want to use these, or are you thinking
no, the snips work the best.
These are
the snips.
So these are diving snips, pretty common in a lot of divers' tools and things like that.
They're trauma shears, and they hold up pretty well in the water and are useful for a lot of situations. Mm-hmm. All right, so remember we're gonna have spines on the bottom here, so that's why it's nice to have gloves on when you're handling them on the bottom.
Yeah, I'll let you handle this.
So some of the larger lionfish will get what's called cheek mail right here, and you can hear that's pretty hard. So you can handle them, if you're holding that with your bare hands, after a while your fingers are going to get pretty raw. This one here, this is a smaller lionfish, and you can see the face is a little bit softer, so it's just easier to be safe and use the gloves. Actually, I don't want on this hand. It's easier to handle this too.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So here we go.
So again, we do want to make sure to recommend that, when you're doing this, you're really kind of making sure you have the proper training to do so, because if you are envenomated by these, it will hurt a good bit. Right. And to apply heat if for some reason you do get stuck.
So here are the 13 venomous spines on the dorsal. So you can see that comes right off, and one thing to note is the venom exists within the spines. If you're preparing this fish to eat, you don't have to worry about ingesting venom and getting sick from that.
There's no like venom glands or really anything like that in the fish or in the meat of the fish that you really have to worry about.
So then we have the pelvic spines that's on the edge here, but it's easy to just cut these off. And then we have the anal spines, so you got 3 of them right here, right? Get those. All right, so there we go. So there's no spines there, none on top, and none on the bottom. Okay.
All right.
So at this point, you could just handle the fish with your bare hands. For some people who prepare the fish, they like to keep these pectoral fins on just for something to hang on to, but it's up to you.
Well, why don't we get a closer look at kind of what's going on inside of the fish? So here you go. So despite the fact that these are invasive fish, they do have a lot of properties just like normal fish. The things like the gills, jaws, swim bladder. These are all things that are universal for reef fish that allow them to exist the way they do, and these fish have that as well.
And it'll also give us an opportunity to see if there's anything in the stomach.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
See what's eating.
So yeah, so these are just kind of cutting along this groove here and kind of opening up for us to see.
All right. See his little fish heart.
Sorry?
Nothing. Let me see these smaller shears.
Yep.
All right, so while we're getting going, we have a question from Amber. Hey, Amber. She had thought that the venom was in the skin and delivered through syringe-like spines.
Correct. So,
But yeah, if you want to, maybe if you could get a spine and just kind of carefully handle it, maybe with one of your gloves.
you want a spine?
Just so we can kind of, because it is interesting. It is actually within the skin that's existing along the spine. And so, yeah, here we go. So this is a closer up, since we couldn't show you with the camera here. This is a book, Invasive Lionfish, A Guide to Control and Management, edited by James A. Morris Jr. This is available online, and we're happy to make sure this is a resource available to people. But this is a great kind of overview of lionfish. So if we look in here, so this is a close-up shot of what that is looking like. And basically, so what's called here, this sheath is more or less, this is kind of skin-like tissue that's wrapped around that spine. And within that skin is where the venom is located. So essentially, once it's disturbed and that sheath is pushed back, like what we did with our cloth earlier, and that sheath is pushed back, that disturbance is what triggers the venom to move through these grooves and into whatever it's poking into.
So if we had a microscope, that would be pretty cool to look at, huh?
It would be pretty cool.
So I think what we're saying is one of our future Science Saturdays, we want to play with a microscope.
Oh, sounds like
We've had a telescope before, thanks, Nino. But I think that a microscope would be really fun.
So Jason, what are you getting into here now? So it looks like
We got a stomach right here. We'll open that in a moment and we'll see if it was eating anything. Back here you can see the swim bladder, which is, it's attached to the top of the empty body cavity here.
and what does the swim bladder do?
It allows the fish to regulate its depth, so that way it can remain neutrally buoyant in the
Kind
water.
of like a diver with a BCD. Like
Right.
that one back there.
Right, so it's basically a pocket of air that they can regulate so that they're staying neutrally buoyant like a diver. And so sometimes you can see that that'll get expanded when we bring them up to the surface if they're not regulating their temperature right, or regulating their buoyancy right.
Right, so if, like when you're fishing and you bring a fish up from deeper down, when you bring them up to the surface, they're bloated. That's usually because of that gas trapped in the swim bladder that they can't get out quick
It's not
enough.
something they ate.
It is not something that they ate.
That's my excuse. Okay, but yeah, so we've got the swim bladder kind of in the middle here, and that's kind of attached in the central part of the fish here.
Correct. You get the gonads that are typically attached right there on the swim bladder, but this one for me is a little bit immature. It doesn't appear that they have any development of.
So this is still a
Eggs.
juvenile potentially, or is it a female?
I believe this one is a female.
But not necessarily developmentally.
Correct. So
ready.
just because they are mature enough to develop eggs, they don't necessarily because it uses a lot of energy. So we have the stomach right here. So we're gonna see if we can open that up and see if there's anything inside.
So here, I'll hold here.
Science is always more fun with a friend.
And so, kind of like what we were mentioning before, these guys have an incredible appetite, and so we can see this stomach expanded quite a bit once they're really kind of getting into their feeding. And we've been known to find small fish, even other lionfish, in the stomach.
That's correct. And the stomach, they can eat fish almost 2/3 their own size. Which,
That's crazy.
Which, I mean, you can see here. We'll kind of get the jaw open here. Once they start eating, if they really kind of want to, they have this ability to kind of expand their jaw quite large. So you see kind of how they have this. This is kind of like, reminds me of, a largemouth bass or something like that. That expandable jaw allows them to eat things that are many times their size of what you would normally expect.
Which is one of the reasons they're so dangerous to our ecosystems here. They are eating a lot.
So this stomach looks empty right now.
It's hungry.
Yeah, you can see the stomach lining there. So depending on how how long before how long they've ingested a prey, we can either identify it wow, that's it's a
Cleaner goby.
Exactly, a cleaner goby. It's really easy to identify. Then they start to break down with the stomach acids, and you can tell it was a goby. And then it gets to the point where it's like, oh, it looks like a small fish. and then it just turns into goo, and it's like, well, it ate something.
Right.
But we also find little shrimps in there. Yeah.
So this is a really common practice that we use to understand, you know, what these fish are eating and kind of what fish may be in danger when we see lionfish appear in a region.
Yep.
Here's another really good, interesting thing to see. This is, I know a lot of people are familiar with gills. This is what the internals of a gill look like, right? And then
Okay, sorry guys, we just paused out for a second. We're barely connected to Wi-Fi. We're good though.
But so we were just talking about these gills here. Basically, what's going on with these? You see how bright red they are. What we have is water will move through their body, either coming in from their mouth or kind of being flapped using this gill. And then as the water passes over here, any dissolved oxygen will kind of, as it comes across in contact with this, will diffuse into the gill, and that's how the fish breathes. So this is what fish have instead of lungs.
That's really cool. Hey Bob. Got Bob from Team Frapper on the line.
What's up, Bob?
All right, let's keep going.
Oh.
This is what the people want to see.
I thought this was I thought that was a question.
Oh no, just saying hi. Haven't seen Bob in a while.
Hey, Bob.
Hi,
Okay,
Mom. My mom's on too.
So what's some other things we've got in here, Jason?
All right. You can see the intestines. This is the.
Isn't this the?
We have a liver in there.
Yeah, liver.
Excuse
See
me.
the heart up here.
So we've got another stomach question. First of all, we're very disappointed there weren't any fish in there.
Let's check the other one.
But we do have another fish. But Amber would like to know, do we see cleaner organisms, gobies and cleaner shrimp, in their guts frequently?
Yes. For the ones that we can identify the fish inside, we do see that quite often. Yeah. And, a lot of times when we do come across like the active feeding lionfish, they'll be surrounded by schools of very tiny fish. So like the little wrasses, small grunts, things like that.
Right.
And if we're successful in removing one of those lionfish, the schooling fish around them is typically what we find inside. I did actually get a lionfish one time that still had a small soldier fish sticking out of its snout, and when I got the lionfish, I opened its snout and the fish swam back into the water, so that was kind of interesting.
What?
I really wish I had a camera for that.
That's crazy.
Always on those moments.
But it's like Joe was talking about with the mouth on the lionfish did not look like it could be open any wider. So I mean, it's
Again, that's really
Oh,
expanding.
Bob.
They would be great opera singers.
So.
But yeah, getting back into...
Yeah, so we do have the intestines. This is where the vent of the lionfish is right here. So all of the
excrement.
Yep, that's where that all comes out
The
of.
waste.
That's correct.
All the professional.
They're talking about poop.
Kitty can say it.
We do tend to find a lot of like interstitial fat in these lionfish. They're so.
So you can see all this in here, just kind of fatty tissue.
They are
amongst the intestines.
They're eating so often that I have read that they've seen lionfish where they're having like liver failure because of all this fat that they're constantly processing.
They're essentially overeating.
Yeah.
The ones in the Caribbean.
Right. And also they've been observed where they eat, and then they regurgitate, and then they continue eating other fish.
Eating machines.
They are. They tend to be a little bit more active at night. So if you go out in the middle of the day hoping, to catch a lionfish, they're typically hiding under ledges quite well. And a lot of times when midday like that, they'll have their spines down and their fins in like this, and they'll be hiding against like the roof of a cave, and they blend in really well, in those dark areas. And then once it starts to get towards dusk and later into the night, they'll come out and they'll start to forage on the reef.
Maybe kind of get this skin back. Kind of look at the flank here.
Yeah, so for those chefs or fishers watching, the really fun part about cleaning lionfish is that we can do a fillet and a dissection every time. So when Jason brings fish home, when we're cleaning them to cook, they're really sustainable fish because they're invasive. So we end up with a lot of... Sorry about that, guys. We just froze for a second. So every time we clean the fish, we end up doing a little mini dissection. And it's really fun because we can know that we are eating a really sustainable fish, and it is delicious. It is easy to cook. And I don't want to spoil the surprise, but we're actually going to end today with a little treat.
Sure. So what all I'm doing right now is the main part of the fish that we're interested in eating is actually just kind of along the flank. And so we're going to kind of just walk through briefly how I make fillets, noting that my technique is not the best. But kind of the first step here, lionfish have a pretty a decent skin on them. And so the first step we'll kind of do, first step we'll
sharpen
do
your knife.
Is sharpen our knife. But we'll basically just kind of pull this skin back so you can kind of see how everything is placed, and then we'll remove the fillet itself. Normally I'm doing this in the comfort of my own home after a dive, so doing it for a live audience is interesting. Note that this is something that's normally, it's a lot easier to do once you've removed those spines. You don't need to remove the spines necessarily, but it definitely makes it a lot easier to handle the fish without worrying about any of those spines sticking in. So basically all I'm doing right now is I'm just making a cut along kind of that top portion here. And the most important thing I'm doing is I'm just making a cut in the skin, because it's got to be easiest to kind of peel that skin first.
And you guys can see that there are these little cycloid scales. So they do have scales, but you don't really want to sit there and scale these guys the whole time.
No, especially when a lot of it will come off with the skin. So yeah, so I've made a kind of cut in the top, and Jason's kind of started the bottom cut here, but I'm just going to kind of finish that cut. Kind of just going in here. And again, I'm just really kind of just trying to get that skin.
We also typically don't gut the fish before we see them.
Right, that does make it a touch more difficult, but not impossible. So okay, so I've kind of made 3 cuts here, one here, and then Jason and I kind of made this cut along here. So I'm just going to kind of make sure that the skin of the fillet is fully separated. And then I can actually just kind of get a little piece here. It's not quite separated. There we go.
Use your teeth.
So and you can see I can just kind of get my thumb underneath that skin. And once I've done that, this skin just kind of peels right back.
Ooh.
And what was not as clean as I normally am, I promise. But the important piece is here. So this is kind of that fish fillet, right, that we're used to seeing. And then this was the kind of the gut contents that we were just going through previously. And so, kind of once you've got this skin pulled back all the way, you can more or less repeat the cut just right where you had for the fillet. And you'll actually be able to, as you're doing this, you'll kind of feel some of the bones of the rib cage and the spinal cord and the vertebra, and we'll kind of get into that as we can. And so basically just kind of scoring along the top and this front side here, so you can cut along that and kind of get at this meat here. So now
I also want to point out that if you're doing this at home to, feed yourself and your family, it doesn't have to be pretty. We save the messy bits and give them to the cats. Lionfish is all of our favorite food.
Yeah.
Actually, all of our cats are at the window watching.
Yeah, I know. If when I get home, my cats are gonna smell me and be like, "Where's the lionfish?" So this is kind of a quick and dirty fillet. So the nice thing about this is it doesn't have any bones on it, right? So you can just put this in a pan, fry it up. I personally like to make a fried lionfish taco or something like that.
So my favorite, we're going to demonstrate right now. Jason is just rinsing off that really quickly, but I have over here, some ceviche mix ready. So we have local orange from the yard mixed with some olive oil and apple cider vinegar. We're gonna toss in some fresh thyme from the garden, Well, this is quite a trick to do this and hold my camera. Sorry, guys, I don't know what I'm pointing at.
I would offer, but
It's all right. So we're going to throw some thyme in there. Oh, thanks, Jason. Let's just do that because I am not dressed to be on camera today. And we have this beautiful filet. We can just cut it into a few smaller pieces.
no problem.
Just so that it fits in the bowl. And this could be a topic for another Science Saturday, but we are actually cooking this with the acid and the vinegar and the orange.
Right, there's no heat, no actual like stovetop involved. It's just the actual compounds that are in the acid of the orange, right? And the vinegar.
Right. So if we were making this for some friends coming over for dinner, we could leave that for about 30 minutes and it would be delicious. But quick secret, it's already delicious. So, bon appetit. Yum.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Joe?
fresh caught?
Fresh caught lionfish.
Sure. Let's see here. Smells great too.
Thanks.
That's
All right.
excellent. We do ours with lime juice as well. So there's a lot of different ceviche recipes, but the lionfish, especially in this recipe, it retains a lot of its flavor. Lionfish is kind of it's a white fish. Once you cook it, it's kind of more flaky. And so there's a lot of things you can do with it. Like I said, making fish sticks, tacos, ceviche, all kinds of flavor.
So we've got a question from Sophia, and this is great. Should we be concerned about ciguatera poisoning when eating lionfish?
That's a great question. So any reef fish potentially could have ciguatera. For anyone that eats fish locally, you either go fishing in areas that you know to be safe, historically, or you go to local fishermen that fish in areas that have been safe to eat fish from historically. So when eating lionfish, you do the same thing. You want to get fish in areas that you would get any of the other reef fish that you would eat. You also want to just be careful with the size of the fish. If you found a lionfish that was 2 feet long, I would probably avoid eating that because ciguatera is bioaccumulative, so it works its way up the food chain, and as you get to a larger fish, it becomes more toxic. Now, there have been studies that have been done on the lionfish locally. They have tested for ciguatera. Hopefully there will be some future studies. They don't test any higher than the other reef fish that people are eating. And nobody, as far as I know, has ever gotten sick from eating lionfish, have gotten ciguatera poisoning from eating.
And that is according to hospital records. Nobody's ever reported.
Right.
And again, bioaccumulative, that goes for people as well as the fish. And so unless a fish has a very, very high level of ciguatoxins, if you're not eating fish as often as somebody else, then you're less likely to get a hit from it. But like Jason said, always be careful. Trust your fishermen. They're a very important part of our community. Yeah,
So,
we've got a hi from Aruba Lionfish Initiative Foundation. Eat 'em to beat 'em. Absolutely, Abigail. We agree.
So,
I'm actually filming this fish, but looking over at the fish in the ceviche mix, and I might just have that while nobody's looking.
So before we sign off, I do want to kind of spend some time to talk about what's happening in the local effort and kind of what we're doing in terms of combating the lionfish as we have more visitors here. But so this was Jason here has been doing work with the Core Foundation for a long time. That's why he's been such an expert. They want some lionfish. But Jason, you want to talk a little bit about kind of what Core Divers are doing and kind of what we do there?
Sure. So Core is the Caribbean Oceanic Restoration Education Foundation. We are on St. Thomas, St. Croix, and St. John. We have volunteers and each island that can help to train people who are interested, whether it's just interest in lionfish in general without ever getting in the water, or if they wanted to be trained to go out on dives where they can help spot lionfish for other divers to remove, or if they wanted to go out and remove lionfish themselves. We typically do trainings every other month, and we haven't done any trainings recently, obviously. But you can go on our website, or you can go on our Facebook page, and you can see when those trainings are going to take place. For certain areas, like around St. John, we have the national park area, so we can do some specific training where we can maybe get permits for you to get into national park area for removing fish there, because typically there's no fishing within the national park.
Right.
And we'll show you how to safely remove fish, how to find them, how to do it with proficiency so you're not damaging the reef that you're trying to protect at the same time.
Yeah, and I've liked that you've got this here. I mean, so even if you don't feel comfortable removing, or say, for example, you don't have the materials to do so, if you can get a photo, you can report a lionfish is there, where trained divers can then come in and remove it. I mean, lionfish do tend to stay in a specific area, so if you have a point where you say, I saw a lionfish right here, and especially if you can get a photo of that, and you can file a report on the Corps' website to say, I saw a lionfish here, and we can go and we can remove it for you. So just because you're not necessarily comfortable or proficient in lionfish removal yet, those reports are huge.
They are, and we have our own local map on lionfish sightings and removals. If you're actively removing lionfish and you put them, you enter that data into the website. We're not taking any personal information. We're not going to bother you with emails. We're not going to sell any of your stuff. But you can put your lionfish information in there, and if in the future, after removing fish for a few months or years, you can go back and you can see your progress over the years and how you've helped the
Career
Virgin Islands.
stats.
That's correct.
We're all missing sports right now. You want some career stats? Go remove some lionfish.
That's right. So it does have the active map on there. We do have a feed on there. So if you if anyone's like reporting lionfish, you can go on there. It's a good communication tool, because it's also difficult if somebody spotted a lionfish, somebody removed it, and then no one told the next person that's going out there. So it's a good way to communicate and meet some other divers or people who are interested in kind of the same things.
We have a question from Amber. How long between reporting and pickup or catch on average?
Well, if you call us, we can usually get somebody out there that day or next day, usually pretty quickly. That depends on the location of the fish, because if the fish is in your offshore secret site, depending on weather conditions and access to boats and stuff can be an issue. But if you saw one while snorkeling at your nearest beach, it's a lot easier for us to get down there. And if you give us a call and we're not available, we call other responders and say, hey, we got a lionfish if you're interested, or if you're available to go get it. And then once it's removed, they enter it into our database.
And we've removed some from anywhere from marina docks where they've been spotted. Correct. To local beaches to like Jason said, deep offshore fishing sites or things like that. Once that report is in, it kind of falls on us to figure out the best way and most effective way to remove it.
Yeah. And if you use the online reporting form, there's a map on there, and so you can drop a pin and just give a brief description of, it was 100 yards offshore on the right side of the beach, and this is what that coral head looks like. That's really helpful. Just dropping a random pin in the middle of the ocean, which has happened. We have a couple in some lakes and rivers in the U.S. as well. We probably won't get to those.
But we might find somebody. We've got friends.
Yeah, right, exactly. But yeah, I think, those reports are received actively. Yeah. So, once we get those reports, we do get a notification, and we act on it immediately as soon as we really can.
Correct. And that information is also important. We can we look at that data at the end of the year, and we can see how active the organization is as far as training new members. Down here in the islands, we have we don't always have people that stay long term, but we always have new people coming in. So it's good to keep people interested that way. It allows to see if if we're getting more reports and more removals, if there's any differences in sizes, and how that works throughout the year. We typically catch smaller fish now, and in a few months we'll start to see the larger ones, or vice versa. So all that data is pretty important. It kind of helps us to gear up for those times a year, what specialized equipment might be more useful, and also what to be looking for.
Yeah. So we'll make sure that the contact information for Core is available kind of in our video caption for sure. I do want to take the time, Jason, thank you for coming on to Science Saturday. This was a really cool project, and heck, you made a little snack for us and everything. If there are no more questions, I think we'll go ahead and sign off and let you guys go out and catch some lionfish yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much to everybody.
Is Bob still online?
I don't know if Bob's still there, but we all want to say hi, and thank you to everyone who tuned in live, and this video is available on the DPNR Facebook page to watch whenever you want, especially if you want my very amazing recipe for lionfish ceviche. And guys,
What a way to close out.
I'm definitely gonna eat this. Everyone have an amazing day. Bye.